We just came from COP26 recently, and we've heard a lot of things. It showed us the difficulties of reaching a consensus on the ways to achieve the decarbonization that is needed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. However, the stakes are very global, so how do we reconcile the world's growing energy needs and climate? How to turn a constraint actually into opportunities and value creation? These are the questions that we are going to address with two flagships of the energy sector. So Patrick, who is here with us, TotalEnergies, and Francesco, how are you? Thank you.
I'm fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, of course. Thank you for joining. So I was just telling Patrick that I was just thinking that probably we had to do the face-to-face, just the two of us. So it's great to have you. So
Patrick.
Thank you for joining, Francesco. Francesco, let me just start probably by just asking you this first question and just go straight into the topic matter. So we are looking at the ambitions and the roadmaps of the pathways to decarbonization. So Enel has recently brought forward its commitment to be net zero by 10 years, so from 2050 to 2040. So what are the main actions you are implementing to reach this new ambitious objective?
Well, you know, what we had in mind is to look at the decade, and not really to 2040. So we started looking at up to 2030. And we realized that what we saw last year was, first of all, confirmed. That is that the theme of the past decade, that is the renewables and their big show up in the energy systems, and the fact that they are now the backbone of electricity generation of the future. I mean, this fact is confirmed, so they are the present and the future of generation. But it's no more news. It's just a fact that everybody more or less understands and shares. So we look at what next will be the theme in the 2020-2030 decade. And we understood that it is something already happening, more or less in a perhaps less conscious way. That is the progressive electrification of energy consumption in different parts of society, in the economy, in different parts of the industry, that will bring electricity in places where electricity has never been before. The most notable and the most obvious is, of course, cars and everything that has to do with transportation. But I think there will be heating, there will be cooking, there will be various industries, and basically everything that has to do with heat will progressively be electrified up to a certain temperature. So the theme that we developed during this decade was, how do we do that, and where that does lead us? And we understood by doing this progressive exercise that our decarbonization objectives were no more, of course, only scope 1. Which, you know, scope 1 is for us basically renewables and shut down thermal generation, but scope 3, which is a big part. And we understood that there is a high potential for scope 3 to be zero by 2040, at least for what we are concerned. And we're talking about 70 million customers, out of which about 5 million are gas customers,
right,
that will have to switch to electricity, and all our supplier and the basic supply chain that will have to decarbonize. We think it can be done. We think it can be done progressively and without major trauma between now and 2040.
Okay, thank you.
That was basically the idea.
Right, Francesco, we'll get back to that in a couple of seconds, but let me just turn to Patrick for now. For TotalEnergies, you have changed the name, actually, to anchor your ambition to become a broad energy company. So how are you looking at the net zero, ambition to 2050? What would be your roadmap, actually, to reach this objective? And I know there's lots going on at TotalEnergies right now.
Thank you, first of all, to welcome me, and hello to Francesco. He's a model for me, He's the first one in my life who spoke to me about electricity value chain. We were in California and convinced me that I had to work seriously on it. He does not know that. But no, more seriously, yes, we have embarked in in a transformation within Total. You know, we are a major oil and gas company. We decided that we need, as a whole society, to embark to this net zero ambition. It's a great ambition. We need to. It's a huge ambition, in fact, to change the energy system of the planet. But we are a clear leader on the present one, which is fossil fuels. Right. No shame, by the way. Our life is because of that, you know. So I'm proud of it. But we want Total TotalEnergies to remain one of the leading energy company in 10, 20, 30 years. That means fundamentally being a leading player of building the new decarbonized energy system. And the new decarbonized energy system is made of two things: electrons on one side, which is why I'm here today, and molecules on the other side, because we must also think to biofuels and other e-fuels and other ways, because you don't only need electrons. But electricity is central in all the climate roadmap, you know. Right. And so the big decision we have taken from a strategy for our company is to embark in the electricity value chain. Not just, by the way, being only a renewable producer, which is part of it, and this is the most emblematic part of it, but to be along the value chain, including, by the way, storage of electricity through batteries and others, including trading. We are building a very large trading arms, which is not yet visible, but is growing quickly, and down to customers, by the way. And we have today 6 million customers in Europe, and we intend to grow it. And so that's a vision. And why? Because fundamentally, this is a market which will grow, double between 2020 and 2050, electricity. The oil market will decline. The gas market might be stable or grow and then decline again. Gas is a transition fuel. But so this is a strategic decision. We do it with we have demonstrated during the last 5 years, and we have accelerated in the last year. But we have built teams around the planet. We can grow a real, I would say, electricity company within TotalEnergies. Of course, priority is being given to, and we have one chance. We go from zero, you know, so I don't have to decarbonize my electricity capacities. I don't have coal. I don't have too many gas-fired power plants. But we are so building a green one. It's the same, by the way, on the distribution side, on the supply side, where we have a digital arm to build it. So it's a way to attack, to a new market with some agility of being a new player, you know, but with a great ambition. So 100 gigawatts by 2030. Which is not zero, 35 gigawatt by 2025.
Very ambitious.
But it's not only ambition, by the way, it's facts. We will be at 10 this year. Next year, we will grow by 6 gigawatts per year in the next 4 or 5 years, and the 8, and we have the projects in our hands, so it's a matter now of execution. So, this is very new, but again, this is a roadmap. And at the end of the day, my guess, by 2050, production of electricity by TotalEnergies is much larger than one of oil and gas, you know, because the energy markets are moving, so we have no choice.
Yeah.
We want to be,
it made sense.
It's a no-regret strategy, and more fundamentally, we consider that there are a lot of opportunities which is given by this huge growth of the electricity market, including, by the way, by derivatives, e-fuels tomorrow. When you speak about hydrogen, green hydrogen, it's electricity. So if you want to manage the ingredients of these new decarbonized energies, electricity is just central. That's why we have decided to go into that direction and to go it in a large way. We have not only financial capacity, we have also people. Right. And it's part also of the journey. We have made a strong evaluation. Today, all engineers and technicians Total are working for all energies. And we think that we have some competencies that we can leverage, and not only our global outreach to become these leading players of the energy transition.
Right, so we're going to speak a little bit more about that. So you mentioned it, more carbon-free energy means more electricity, more renewables, speaking about solar, wind, which are now more mature, but at the same time, the question that's rising is the complementarity between energies to deal with this intermittency of these renewables. You mentioned your plan to provide 100 gigawatt, ambitious plan, and you often say that natural gas is the energy of transition. However, it is still a fossil fuel. Why don't you directly jump to renewable energies?
Why? Because you want intermittent electricity as a customer? You will be happy if you have only electricity during when it's very solar and wind? No. Just because we have customers. And I think this is this debate about fossil or no fossil. The question is to decarbonize the energy. Obviously, at the end of the day, we will not get natural gas. But in the meantime, the first step that we should establish, and by the way, it was a big debate in Glasgow, is to phase out or phase down coal. How do you do it if you do not have, I would say, a fuel which is given a controllable fuel, a pilotable fuel, which will allow to cope with intermittency? And you can use nuclear, obviously, you can use hydro, but you have also, in many parts of the world, natural gas is this right complement. If we can shift in China and India, convince them to shift from coal to gas, it's already a big step towards this neutrality. It's not a final, this is why I'm using final stage. I'm using the word transition fuel, and yes, it's a transition fuel, but this is a good one. And so this, this ideology to say everything what is fossil is bad, no, I think we need to, at the end of the day, we need to think of customers. We are working to deliver energy, and people want a firm power. And of course, we can build in the meantime. I think we'll be able to raise technologies in batteries. Hydrogen could become a storage carrier, a storage for electricity, but all that is not there today. So the question, how do we make, and this is, I think, a big debate, because the idea that you must at the same time build the new decarbonized energy system, which requires trillions of dollars, but also at the same time demolish, I would say, or disintegrate the existing one, just does not work. Look what is happening with the price today. Why do you have high prices of gas and then electricity? Just because you had in China a crisis and a strong gas demand to cope with intermittency of electricity, less hydro, less imports of coal from Australia, which was good, but at the end of the day, it resulted in hike of gas price in China and back to Europe and high electricity price. The reality is that in our world, all these energies are interconnected, all these markets. So it's more complex. And it's a mistake to think that we can build the future just by, we have a renewable policy, we have a nuclear policy, we have a gas policy, and all that is antagonizing. It's a big mistake. At the end of the day, and in particular when you speak about electricity, it's a secondary energy. It's not coming from the wall, you know? So that means that you have to look to where are the feedstock. And I think this is, by the way, we consider one of the key competence we have as TotalEnergies, which we understand all these markets, and we can manage this complexity. So I know the debate, but I mean, let's stay ideology. I'm convinced that at the end of the day, yes, we'll be able to build a fully decarbonized energy system, but it will take time, and it's not for the 10, 20 next
and that's your main
years.
objective.
And this is a transition. Transition, again, nothing will happen in a night. It's not true.
Right, and the price thing, we'll talk about that in the other discussion with Robin Alevi later on. But I would like to turn to you, Francesco. So I know that Enel has decided to pull out from coal by 2027 and from natural gas by 2040. So we're speaking about controllable energy to compensate the intermittency of solar and wind farms. So will you need that, or will you invest in nuclear? What's your position? And probably a quick reaction on Patrick's insights.
I think that the time it takes for us to decarbonize fully, it is something between 2030 and 2040. So it's, as far as we are concerned, we will be at more than 80% of renewables by 2030. What does that mean is that by then, what we foresee as electric systems in which those where we will be present, I mean, we're not everywhere in the world, but those in which we will be present are pretty large, I would tell you. They will be fixed, they will be full with all kinds of storage systems that are now already available, and that will be increasingly convenient to use and cheap. So we have to understand that we will be surrounded by batteries much more than we are today. You know, this is already a battery if you want, but we will have batteries everywhere. We'll have batteries in our homes, we'll have batteries in the networks, and we will have batteries connected to the networks to do all kinds of services. Plus, there will be gravitational storage systems, thermal storage systems for industries, and also pumped storage. So storage is going to be a huge business going forward. If you take, for example, our pipeline of development projects, which I think is probably one of the largest in the world, if not the largest. We have about 371,000 megawatts of developed projects that we are going to put into the investment chains in the next years. Out of those, 51,000 megawatts are batteries of different kinds and different ways, and batteries will be everywhere. So I'm not that concerned about this modulating or intermittency of renewables anymore. It will be compensated by thermal generation as long as it will be economically viable, but it will be substituted with batteries when batteries will make more sense in terms of money. From the point of view of performance, I don't see much of a difference. Actually, I think gas is going to be there as long as gas will stop being so volatile. I think it's in the hands of gas to decide what is its own future. And the present situation is a testimony that it is not wise to rely on gas because it is unreliable insofar prices and quantities are concerned. So, it can change. If gas behavior changes, this can completely change. But from that point of view, I think it is unfortunately going to follow a little bit. And this is something I told Patrick already once. There are two brothers. One is crazy oil, and the other brother is crazier gas. So, I mean,
Patrick disagrees.
No, I disagree. And just if I may add on one point, by the way, TotalEnergies strategy, to be clear, we do not invest as other utilities in any greenfield gas-fired power plant. We have bought some old gas-fired power plants, good business, by the way, today, making lots of money with them. Thank you to some of the people in the room. So we are happy to that. So we don't intend to build a green, because we think that it's might become a stranded asset in the future. So we'll look to what the German players will do. And remember that the first move we've done in electricity in TotalEnergies, and when I was CEO, was to buy a battery company, Saft. So fundamentally, when I discovered in 2015, with renewable, we had only one asset, which was SunPower. It struck me immediately, I was discovering this work, but it was not, the economy could work only if we're able to store the electricity. And so I said, okay, what are the battery companies? So we have in our portfolio Saft, and we are beginning to work with it, including, by the way, in EVs, etc. So I think I have the same vision, that's why we think this asset has a long-term value. And I'm sure that in the future, my successor will be very happy to have this Saft company within TotalEnergies perimeter.
Thank you for sharing both.
I think it was a good idea to buy Saft. It's a good. No, really.
I'm crazy with oil and gas, but I'm not crazy with batteries. That's good.
Right. Getting back to the nuclear topic, of course, we've heard the French president on this topic. You have already declared that TotalEnergies won't be taking part in these nuclear projects. But I would like to know, what's your vision, as a global energy actor, Patrick?
I mean, I think Jean-Bernard will come, so he's much better than me on that one, No, but my vision as I would say, a more energy market, I think obviously nuclear is a decarbonized energy. That's obvious for everybody. So it's a solution, and for me, this is a debate. I will explain you why we will not invest, but I think it's a debate between, is our problem a 50 years problem, which is climate change, urgent to solve, and be in front of another problem, which is a nuclear waste of 1,000-year problem. And so when you say it's a problem like that, I can understand that some countries can invest in that energy. Having said that, I say some countries, because for me, nuclear is a state matter. It's a really, we've observed, and so why I will not invest, just because I will not recommend to TotalEnergies shareholder to put some money in something which could destroy the company in case of an accident. And so, unfortunately, I have to observe what happened when you had Fukushima would have happened with TotalEnergies. I could tell you, I'm not sure I would be there today. I'm sure I would not be there, by the way. So, I mean, so for me, and again, we have nuclear, by the way, is a great energy, but it's a lot of capital as well. We have embarked into, we have made a choice of electricity plus with renewables, green electricity. So I will let other players to invest. But fundamentally, I think they need a strong support from the state, and that there is a difficulty to manage the nuclear risk within the balance sheet of a publicly listed company.
And Francesco, what's your vision?
Yeah, I should say I am a nuclear engineer myself. So We have 2,300 megawatts of nuclear capacity that we own and manage in Spain. I would tell you more or less this in the lines of what Patrick said. The present generation 1 and generation 2 and extended generation 3, if you want, nuclear reactor technology is something that cannot be replicated anymore. It is something we have coming from the past. It's a known technology. The investments were done a long time ago, mostly by state companies at that time. Private companies would not invest in nuclear capacity anymore today with that technology, because it has engineered itself out of the world. After the two incidents of Chernobyl and Fukushima, this technology has become too big to manage, too complex to design, and too difficult to execute. So only governments, states can afford the idea of having a nuclear plant, not private companies. But that said, I think there are different evolutions and different types of nuclear technologies that can change the story of nuclear. And I think Jean-Bernard will tell you more about it, because he is definitely the man in this field. It will take, however, between now and 2040 for these technologies to become commercially viable. So this is a great debate, because we all do like to talk about things that we know are not going to happen soon. It's a fantastic place where you can discuss forever. So it's a great thing to study nuclear and to develop nuclear for the future, but we have to understand this is not going to be there between now and 2040, for sure. So for us, it's interesting. We're going to study, but there's no investment thesis around nuclear anymore. I should add, we are also co-owning one of the first reactors that will come online in Europe in the next few months, which is in Slovakia, Mochovce 3 and 4. That's a Russian technology. It's a little bit simpler, but still like 2 times over budget and for 3-4 years in delay. So it's not something you can do anymore today. So, like I said, private companies, these technologies, it's a non-starter. States, they can do it. New technologies need to be studied. I think they will finally be tried and successfully launched, but we're talking about 2040. That, to be honest, this is the time frame.
Yeah.
Thanks, Francesco. Patrick?
Yeah, and so I fully agree, and I think I understand, by the way, the position of France. France is a nuclear state. We want to build on it, but we have to develop. So I mean, I'm respecting and I understand fully, and I'm supportive. I've been supportive in newspapers, and I'm happy to see that there is more or less a consensus about it. And fundamentally, the question for us is then to be able to develop it, to export it to India and China, and to accelerate decarbonization of these countries. This is a mission, but it's a state-to-state. Second, I would say that there is a technology for me which we discovered, which we believe a lot, which is offshore wind. With offshore wind, you can reach, honestly, it's quite capital intensive, so for an oil and gas company, a lot of technologies, but you can reach availability factor, load factors around 65–70%, which were quite impressive, in fact. And in terms of gigawatts, I think that we are able, with this offshore wind technology, to develop some very large plants, of course, still intermittent, but less intermittent than a solar plant onshore, and which can also fit to compare, and I would say to bring part of the solution that nuclear is bringing. So it's also a matter of comparing the new technologies that we have developed in order to understand what will be. And this can be built not in 2040, but in the next 10 years. We can massively build this type of offshore wind farms. Right.
Thanks, Patrick. Francesco, I would like to come back to COP26. So I'm really curious to get your reactions, your feedback. So what are going to be the main conditions of success to reach this temperature of well below 2 degrees that we spoke about during the Paris Agreement? What 2 big flagships, big players in this industry, what's your vision on that? What are the conditions for success? Maybe Patrick first.
I know COP26, I think people have been disappointed. I think you can look to the glass as half full because fundamentally, you know, in 5 years, nobody was really speaking about net zero when we signed the Paris Agreement. The concept was not there. And you have 80 countries, I think, we have set an ambition to get to net zero by 2050 or 60, which is quite a big progress. Of course, we need to accelerate in the next 10 years. This is the other message of the scientists. And what was considered, the NDCs in 2015 were considered to be at around 2.7 degrees above pre-industrial I would say temperatures. Today, what I read from the reports is that the new NDCs are 2.2, 2.4. I don't know exactly. Okay, it's not well below 2, but it's a progress. And I think there is something wrong again there. To believe that you can change an energy system in a night, it does not work. It's a huge task. It's trillions of dollars. So I think that we have embarked, and there are a number of coalitions. There are more and more financing capacities to build this decarbonized, renewable world. This is a positive part again. Of course, what you observe is that you have a debate more and more, but you have to be careful to that debate between the developed countries, rich countries, our countries here, who say, yes, we can do it, and let's embark, and the emerging countries, China, India, South Africa, and others. But we need to respect them. We need to listen to what they said in Glasgow as well. Their priority today is to elevate their people out of poverty and to give access to energy. So that's the debate. And I think for me, if I have two disappointments from Glasgow, first is that the developed countries did not commit to bring not only $100 billion, but more to these countries. So as long as we don't understand that this is a global problem and that we have to finance their development, will not succeed because the Paris Agreement was not only about climate, it was also about development for these emerging economies. And the second disappointment for me is that all the debate almost and all the coalition were about the supply. Anti-fossil supply for renewables, but not about the demand. But again, there was only one coalition about the demand, which was around 2035 EVs, you know, which by the way, or 2040 EVs, which by the way, some countries did not sign, including in Europe. But I mean, this is important because if you want to shift from our system today to the new system, not only we need to build the new system, but we need also to convince consumers to curb the demand. To change their behavior, to change the way they consume energy. And that's not only the suppliers who will do that. It's not my job.
That's everybody's responsibility.
I don't build planes, I don't build the cars. I mean, we have to do that together. And I think there was a disappointment for me in Glasgow, which was this part of the equation, which is the demand, was not really there. But again, some progress has been done. So I'm positive. I think it's a huge task. And I think, so I'm more positive. I'm positive because we've seen some progress. But again, at the end of the day, our countries, our developed countries, will have to take a larger share of the spend to be done in the future. Otherwise, maybe we'll be neutral, net zero in Europe, but the rest of the planet will never be.
Oh, you said that we can't change the industry like that. So we're going towards progress. But then, what about the less than being under the 2 degrees? Francesco, what's your feeling about that?
Well, I think that, first of all, I agree with what feelings Patrick expressed. I also feel that this was more a success than a failure. I think that at the end of the day, the commitment of countries like, I mean, first of all, the fact that the US are back into this logic, which is not small, and the fact that big countries like India, China, made their pledges, and that there is a movement into that part is very encouraging. As far as supply, I think it is quite monumental, the task at hand. I mean, and then the IEA has clearly outlined that we're talking about 5 times the growth of renewables between now and 2040, which is incredible. I mean, it's an expanding space that is expanding so fast that even us, you know, we are the fastest growing one. We run it at the same space, you know, just grow, and remain still percentage-wise the same, because the expansion of this space is amazing. It's not an issue of money, and it's not an issue of logistics or an issue of projects. It's a question of time and how many people you can put at work. So I think the limit here is the people, actually, the skilled people that can do this job. That's really the concern, okay, which is kind of strange. And then there is, on the demand, I think most of the problem is not in the emerging markets. Most of the demand problem is in the mature markets, where demand is incredibly large and very wasteful. So I think here, I'm not that concerned because these markets will understand before than the others that if they switch out of fossil fuels into electricity, their consumption will become more efficient because of technology and more clean because electricity will be decarbonized. So I think the battle is won or lost in the OECD countries first. And the emerging world, although it's a big part of the world, percentage-wise, and in terms of what emissions have been released into the atmosphere, is still quite small.
Absolutely.
So it's up to us to change that story here where we live instead of preaching over there. Because frankly speaking, they have to say at some point when they say, look, guys, you occupied all the space, so fix it first. And I think that can be done with demand. I think that can be done by switching to electricity, which is something that, by the way, is going to change very quickly and is going to affect very fast the OECD countries' economies for the better, I would say. So I'm pretty positive.
Great to hear. Thanks, Francesco. Just to get back to the topic, we're speaking about emerging countries. I would like to put the spotlight on sub-Saharan Africa. So I've worked on the field there. I'm a reporter on the field in Africa mostly. And this is a topic that is very dear to my heart because people live in energy poverty. There, in sub-Saharan Africa, 800 million people or more don't have access to electricity, and several billions of people are depending on wood, charcoal, household waste for cooking. I have seen kids, having lung disease because they don't have electricity and they are inhaling toxic smoke from household cooking. We live in this world today, and this is real. This is no joke. This is very real. So we are Europeans, and we know that in Europe that we know what we've done. And how can we make sure that there is a fair transition? This is exactly what you were saying, Patrick. How do we make this fair transition? We are speaking about SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, the number 7, affordable and clean energy for all, right? We have a big responsibility towards those countries. So what do we do?
We invest, I think, and I think when I speak about 100 gigawatt by 2030, 1/3 of it, at least 40%, will be in emerging countries. So that's an answer. It's to invest. What are the difficulties we face in Africa? I'm frustrated myself. TotalEnergies has a very strong foot in Africa for oil and gas business.
We have to talk about that.
I said to my colleagues, why don't we accelerate in Africa? Why? I will tell you. Because there is no governance at all of electricity in these countries. We set in the past an oil and gas governance in order to be able to manage contracts. On electricity, and electricity is a complex energy because it's a local energy. It's local production, but local consumption and local payments. And so when you have small developers going to Africa, they go to Africa governments and they ask, okay, we want a sovereign guarantee. But these countries are unable to give any sovereign guarantee. We have established a new scheme in Iraq, it's not in Africa recently, where we face exactly the same problem. It's a rich natural resource country with a lack of power. And we managed to put a scheme in place where we'll be paid through oil, not asking to have a sovereign guarantee, and to build 1 gigawatt of solar plants. But this model, I can do it because I have revenues coming from another energy, oil, by the way. Maybe it's a combination of the devil and the green, but it works. And so what is urgent, I would say, if other OECD countries are serious about it, but I'm not sure they're serious, is why don't we put in place an instrument at the World Bank level or IMF, which will be able to give the guarantee that these African countries are absolutely unable to give. And so maybe my company is able to take risks because I'm a large company, but a lot of small developers there are unable to take these risks. And I think this is something which is quite frustrating because everybody, when you discuss, it's easy. So it's not a matter of money. It's just a matter. But when you speak about getting a World Bank guarantee in Nigeria, it took 5 years. And so the problem for us, as investors is that we look to the planet. There are huge opportunities everywhere. And so, as we have also ambition to build my 100 gigawatts, you know, and my totally run subsidiaries have done this calculation. At the end of the day, they say, okay, I need to deliver to Total 5 gigawatts by 2022. Where do I go? And it was more efficient to go in South America, in other countries where these issues. So the solution to your issue is fundamentally, let's put in place instruments to give guarantees to the developers in these African countries.
And this is what is lacking.
And that should be done at the international level. Second comment for charcoal, you know, there is a solution, which is LPGs, just to cook. And that's quite efficient in some countries, in Kenya, in Morocco. I know LPG is a natural gas, but you know, at least you solve the health issue, which is just one of the big issue, major issues. And so if we were able to distribute just bottle LPGs, it solves part of your issues. This is what Prime Minister Modi has done in India. It's very popular in India. Why? Because he's decided that all villages will have access to LPG bottles everywhere in India, and it works. So I mean, that's part. It's also transition fuel again,
right?
But it brings. It's also solved a fundamental issue, which is the health of the people. Sorry to have been long, but
yes, we can talk about that another time, Patrick. So just Francesco, your feeling on that? You just quick feedback.
Yeah, you know, I should tell you, I am the chairman of Sustainable Energy for All, and we are indeed totally focused on SDG 7. Mostly in Africa, because that's where most of the population which has no access to clean electricity, they reside. And there are so many Africas. I mean, Africa is a huge world, plenty of differences and plenty of countries and completely different endowment of natural resources, but more or less the same problem. Lack of networks, because networks are essential to distribute electricity. And the difficulty that resides in different countries having different rules and different regulations. But if you look closely at Africa, you see that Africa is divided, is going to be increasingly apparently divided in two Africas. Not so many, but just two. And these two Africas are those Africas that are the large metropolitan areas of Africa. So the huge multi-million cities of Africa that are exploding nowadays. They become incredibly large by the year after year after year. And the rest of Africa, which remains a little bit detached. So why I'm saying this? Because this helps to look at where is going to be the solution of this problem. Because so many people tried, and all what Patrick said is right. You know, there's so many problems. And you get lost in this jungle. But the real thing is that the cities of Africa are increasingly important in the energy consumption of Africa, as they are in the energy consumption of the world. And the African population is going to cities. Why they do that? Because they think that in cities their life will improve. They think that in cities their future will be better. They get a better education. They get a better job. Their sons, their daughters will have a better life. We know this is maybe not true, but this is what's going. This is the trend right now.
Yeah,
that is what's going on. So when you look at these cities, you see the city and then a larger metropolitan area, invariably more or less not regulated all around. And there you need to bring electricity. There you need to bring basic services. There you need to bring sewage, water. That's where Africa changes. So I'm not saying that you should leave the other Africa around, and maybe you can have some LPG bottles delivered, you know, to remove the coke. But
that's it's progress.
But the big thing is that in these large cities is going to be the future of Africa. So I think we have to focus there and to put networks and to develop power plants, renewable power plants around the cities is possible. So I think the real solution here is kind of new, because this has never been thought like that. But it is to focus on the large energy consumption centers of Africa, which is basically where industries are, where people live, and where population grows, the cities. There are not too many yet, but they will become the megalopolis of the future. And the population trend in Africa is faster growing than the rest of the world. So you're looking at where most of the people will live in the next 50 years.
Absolutely.
So it's very important.
And if I don't know, the example, for example, of Kenya, which is quite unique. If you see what's happening, this is a great example. When you look at Kenya's energy situation, which is absolutely unique, geothermal energy became the primary source of electric power. I think that was like more than 10 years ago. And 80% of the country's electricity mix, I think account more than 80%, I don't know what's the exact figure, but I know it's more, is renewable energy. So if a big country like Kenya can do it, so what
you know, Ethiopia could do it too. They have hydro, they have sun, they have wind, they have also geothermal energy. I mean, we cannot discuss the fact that Africa has an incredible potential for renewable energy sources. The question is, you need to have networks, because we never talk about that. But networks are fundamental for electrification of society. And so those can only happen close to cities, connecting people within city centers.
So, Patrick, what you're saying, it's not the investment is not the problem.
No, but you know, just pragmatically, what we've just done, we have recruited 50 what we call renewable explorers, one in each of the countries where we are present in Africa. We are present in more than 30 countries, with the idea to identify some projects that we will be able to finance it to get out. I think this is something on which we need to put people on the ground. I perfectly agree with the comment of my friend, is that at the end it's a matter of people. Renewable is just a matter of number of people you put on the ground to find the projects, to mobilize the people, to find the space, the land, etc. So I think we are making a pragmatic effort, and so we'll see. But I think that I'm convinced, by the way, that from my perspective, that these countries, these cities, are places where we can find some good, profitable projects for both. There is a lot of competition in some developed countries for renewables. When my investors ask me, but it's not profitable with renewable, why do you invest in renewable? My answer is this: the planet is big, it's very large. So we have to be smart and to find a place where we can do that in a profitable way. And I can tell you our projects in Iraq is very profitable.
So to get back, probably just very briefly, because we have 5 minutes left and time is flying. Patrick, you said investment is not the problem. Sometimes I'm surprised to hear that the money is not the problem. The problem is policy, is what
The problem is to put all that. It takes time. Like I think, again, you're very right. I mean, it takes time. It takes. Yes, we need policies for sure to accelerate. You know, it has been demonstrated with EVs. You know. Today, it's obvious to you that all the light vehicles in Europe will be EVs, but without the directives, the regulation, which came, it would not be the case at all. So various policies can incentivize. We need carbon pricing, of course, in order to push in the right direction, and I think we are in favor of carbon pricing. I've seen a report from, but quite high, by the way. If it stays at $50 per ton, it does not help really. Even $100 per ton. I think the report of UFE say around $150 to $200. If you want to influence the behaviors, but it's market forces, but it's also a combination of market and policies. Otherwise, it will not work. I would just add a word about Europe. 2 comments on Europe. When you speak about net zero Europe, I would like to make 2 comments. First, renewable. I read an interesting report from Enel and Brosetti, where they say the ambition by 2030, 40% renewable is very difficult because of people and because of land. Access to land is just fundamental. I read that the new coalition in Germany says it's only 2% of the country that we need to cover, but 2% of a country like Germany or 1 or 2% of France, it's a huge task. And there, frankly, without the help of planning by governments, by states, leaving that to private players like us, if we continue to build in France solar plants of 50 megawatt, I can tell you we will never reach the objective 50 by 50 by 50, because it's almost the same task, huge task to do it. So planning land is something on which European governments need seriously now to work, and not just stating, let the market forces. So for me, this transition is monumental. And without putting people together, policymakers and companies will not manage to achieve the objective of a global challenge. So again, I'm calling there, it's maybe strange from a publicly listed company, but I think really entering into this business and this huge task, we need the combination of both. So it's not antagonizing.
Right.
The whole debate about antagonizing fossil against renewable, states against market does not work. it's together that we'll manage to reach this objective.
A couple of more minutes left. Probably a very quick reaction on the European taxonomy. Both of you. Francesco, you first.
Well, I think taxonomy is a moving target, and you see that today the rules on renewables have been set. Gas and nuclear came in, I would say, a little later. I think that is a discussion that needs to take place in terms of details the next year. All in all, I think it makes sense that taxonomy does not exclude anything. I mean, otherwise it becomes a very strange place, that a form of energy that has no seat anywhere is a very odd animal. Mm-hmm. Clearly, there must be some kind of defined rules. And I think it's encouraging that, for example, methane leaks are included into the account, because they are a big portion of the CO2 greenhouse gas emission related to the gas supply chain, which need to be definitely brought back into control. But all in all, I think we will have to get used to this word taxonomy, and we will have to get used to the fact that every couple of years there will be a discussion on taxonomy again and again, because technology evolves and taxonomy adapts. It's not the other way around. Mm-hmm.
Patrick?
I think taxonomy was a good concept, is a bad execution. Mm. This is the way to think that we can regulate. By the way, the market forces are enough today to put more emphasis on investing. When you are a fund manager, you want ESG, you know that your customers are willing to be in line with net zero. So you have a strong push to put your money into this. By the way, look to the valuation of renewable companies or green companies. The multiples are quite high, so the market forces are working without the taxonomy. Mm-hmm. Taxonomy, this is a very strange European idea. I think the US will give us a strong lesson, and you will see we're more pragmatic on the other side of the Atlantic, because it's the idea that you can define the good and the bad, and unfortunately you forget the word transition in between, which is very complex, by the way, to imagine a regulation which will itself evolve along the year. So you put a status. So I'm not a big fan at all. I think it's not a major point for us. We will live with taxonomy. And by the way, there are plenty of small technical elements in the taxonomy which are very strange. But I think this is not the right way to regulate. I think honestly that, and I would be fully convinced, by the way, Europe wants to give a lot of lessons to the planet. And I would just make a comment, which maybe will surprise people in this room. When we speak about net zero in Europe, we just have forgotten all the imported emissions. And that means, I think for me, it's a real problem. Because, imported emissions from France, that's half of our emission. Mm-hmm. If we were taking into account the whole story, including imported emissions, I think it would change a lot the view that we have about the pledges from India, China, Vietnam, and all these countries. And maybe we would work in the right directions to go to the global challenge. Right. So taxonomy is another. I think sometimes I'm a little like my UK colleagues. I don't know. I have temptation to vote from something exiting. But that's life.
All right, and are you Total, Enel? We're not talking about competition. What are we talking about? So you have projects in common. You're thinking about how to move this energy transition together. So, any feedback on that?
Let me just say that I think we need all the help we can get to electrify the world. So I think it's a great testimony to the fact that this is where the world is going, that not all, but large oil and gas companies decide to become energy companies. And I think TotalEnergies is a good example of that. It will be obvious that it is not as easy as it looks, but I think this is such an expanding space that nobody can say, I can do it alone. It's too much. So I would much more prefer to have more Totals than those cowboys that we have today in the renewable energy space. And I think it's much better to have serious people and some discipline and a little bit of organization in the way things are being done, rather than completely Wild West. Mm-hmm. So we're not competitors just because you cannot compete in such an expanding universe. It's impossible. You can compete on a project, on hiring somebody, But other than that,
but not on this topic.
No, I
we
agree.
We need all the help we can get.
I agree. This is my answer to all investors. No, there are huge opportunities. So at the end of the day, I think that, by the way, in oil and gas, we have a strange tradition. We make a lot of JVs to share our risk, you know. And so we are competitors, we are partners. I discovered a world in the utility world where it's not really the tradition. Everybody more, probably because the history of all my colleagues are more national companies historically, which we were controlling. I think, honestly, when you look to projects like offshore wind, which are huge capital, I prefer personally to have 2 times 50% of 2 projects than 1 time 100%. And I think there is ways to, because it's a question again of managing the risks. Electricity, again, it's a local risk and a local sales. So I prefer, frankly, to be able to share projects. And so for me, it's a question, do we find ways to combine our forces, maybe in some countries, where we can be more efficient together to convince governments and maybe Africa or elsewhere, rather than competing. Okay, and I know that sometimes my tips are looking, we should look to the planet as a global field of opportunity. So I would be happy, we didn't have much opportunity for the time being to have some JVs with Enel, but I'm sure I will learn, but he will learn as well from us, you know. And,
right.
No, but again, I think we are, for me,
we're not in the offshore. We're not
but that's why it's my call to you, my dear. You need to look at that, you know. You need to, I know. By the way, I need to understand why one of these days and come to you in Milano. No, but thank you. No, I think, honestly, it's not a matter of competing. It's to work. And I think in this field today, the challenge is huge. So let's work and let's find a way to combine opportunities to leverage our own strengths, all different strengths.
Fantastic. I think that if you guys decide to do things together in Africa, we'll be there, definitely. Thank you, Francesco. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you very much. It was great having you. Thank you. Merci, Patrick.